Good morning and welcome to our panel on digital activism in the Middle East and North Africa region, protecting voices of change online. I'm Marissa Khurma, Director of the Middle East program here at the Wilson Center. This is truly an important discussion that I'm especially looking forward to as millions of young people across the MENA region turn to the online spaces for activism in the absence of a free public sphere to express their opinions or simply call and work for change. In many instances, these activists, be it investigative journalists, artists, or social entrepreneurs, are risking their lives in an increasingly repressive environment for open, transparent, and free-flowing discourse. So this is also a very timely discussion that I'm very proud to present under the Middle East Program's Protests and Mass Movements initiative. Thanks to all the distinguished panelists for their time with us today, starting with Sami Hourani, a medical doctor and serial social entrepreneur. He is the founder and CEO of the regional organization Leaders of Tomorrow, as well as a founder of other educational platforms. Mohammed Najm, the executive director of the Beirut-based digital rights organization SMEX, the Middle East and North Africa's leading digital rights organization. Abdussalam Aqad, the founder of Aramram and co-owner of Grayscale Firms. His experience ranges from the director of photography to producer and director, including working on several documentaries for international news organizations. And then we also have Malika Sadasar, a human rights lawyer who serves as YouTube's global head of human rights. And last but not least, the driver behind this panel, whose upcoming book, A Million Clicks to Freedom, is currently in progress. She's working on it here at the Wilson Center, my dear colleague and MEP fellow, Nadia Wedat. Before I hand this over to you, Nadia, a reminder to all of you listening in and watching today to submit your questions in the chat or comments box online, or send us your question via Twitter to @WilsonCenterMEP. Nadia, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Marissa. And I thank my esteemed panelists. I feel so privileged to have such special people with us today, people who are really changing the Middle East. When people think about hope, when people think about what talents exist in the Middle East, they should be looking at people like Sami, like Abdussalam and Muhammad right here. So we here, I believe, have the best and brightest the Middle East have to offer. So since the Green Movement in Iran in 2009 and the Arab uprisings, which showed the world that young people in the MENA region are able to connect with one another, organize, design, and successfully mobilize millions of people to topple quite a few regimes, but also to cause some destabilization in the region. The world took notice, but so have dictatorships. And since then, the digital space has been compromised. Sadly, whereas there was a lot of hope at the beginning that the digital space can really lead to democratization, can lead to a lot of positive changes, which it definitely can. There's also the other darker side, which is right now, this digital space is being pretty much mobilized by dictators, authoritarian regimes, not just within their own borders, but even beyond their borders, because it is an open space. These authoritarian regimes are able to reach citizens all over the world. It is specifically because the digital space is such a vital and important space that voices like our panelists are really important to feature and protect and highlight. So I want to start with you, Sami. As a young person, you embody the potential of the digital space. You have created multiple platforms. You have mobilized a lot of young people. You yourself have basically listened to what young people need. You've created one of the most successful websites, for example, Forsa, to match talent with job opportunities. You've created Diwaniya so that young people can tell you their grievances, and you went about in your beautiful office in Amman, which I've had the privilege of touring. Go about devising means to actually address these challenges. So in today, 2022, with this war of ideas on the digital space and the endless resources of authoritarian regimes, how do you see the potential, but also the challenges from where you stand, in touch with all of these young people that you help and that you work with?
Thank you, Nadia, for your invitation, and it's my pleasure to speak at this session. And I'm just going to go directly into your question. It's, I mean, we're currently managing two portals that has not to do a lot with politics. One, it's Forsa.com, which is, as you mentioned, it's a portal for career development and matching people with capacity building and career opportunities. The other one is the Souqfan.com, which is an e-commerce for handmade and handicrafts. With those two, you still see, I mean, it has nothing to do with politics. It's not about social mobilization, but you still see that there are pressure, especially when it comes to any content that has to do with politics. I think the problem is right now is, and what we see through the engagement on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram and even TikTok, less on TikTok though, that people are they're more censored. The level of self-censorship is really high because today, if you want to post anything, you will always start thinking, is it gonna go to court? Are they gonna complain about it? Is it gonna be considered whatever, something that's gonna violate any law? So people are more up to be engaged, where if you want to look at it, around 6 years ago or 7 years ago, at the time of between 2012 2016, it was totally the opposite. So today, with the lack of freedom of expression, with the I would say very evident self-censorship, the accountability and the social accountability is missing. So we have been living in the region in around 4 or 5 years where accountability is missing. People are really, and especially social accountability. So people are not being able to mobilize. They're not being able to provide any source of accountability on their decision makers. So this is main, and that's creating the situation worse and worse. With that dormancy and that lack of social accountability, it's driving people to apathy. So right now, young people are less hopeful about the future. You can see, and this is something we directly see through Forsa.com. So, when we post any opportunity, like we'll see the comments, oh, we want opportunity to emigrate. Like, where is the opportunity that I can leave the Arab world? From all the Arab countries, we see a lot of those comments that people are really desperate, and they are it's apathy, like lack of energy, lack of motivation, and lack of hope. So that's what we're witnessing on the social media. And this is the result of course, the economic situation is the elephant in the room. But, in the absence of a social contract where the rights are not there, the duties are not clear, the sense of belonging and loyalty is blurry. All this situation leads to the situation that we're living: apathy, despair, and lack of hope. And that's scary, because when people reach the idea of lack of hope, or the level of where they are not hopeful about their future, it's more of like a bomb, maybe. I cannot hear you.
Thank you so much, Sami. You are on the pulse of young people, because your portal is one of the major one, if not the #1 portal. I know that's the case, at least in Jordan, where you connect people with opportunities. And if people just want to leave, they've given up, it really is sad, because that the region needs young people to stay and build their countries. But you pointed to something that is a good segues to you, Abdussalam, because one of the major, in my opinion, actually, as an intellectual historian, number one reason for a lot of the problems in the Middle East is in fact governance, is in fact what you identified correctly, Sami, social contract. Even though we have modern states, we still don't have real equal citizenship, real accountability, like you said, real knowing the rules of engagement with politics. And this is why, as I was researching the best and brightest in the Middle East for my book, I thought what you, Abdussalam, and Hams and your colleagues are doing at Aramram, producing state-of-the-art videos targeting young people to actually educate them on what it's like to engage with politics, what it's like to understand, you know, when somebody runs for office, what questions to ask them. So, Abdussalam, you produce a lot of, like I said, state-of-the-art videos that are educational, targeting civil society, targeting engagement in politics. How are you seeing the evolution of what you're doing, its impact, where it's heading, the challenges you're facing? I'd love to hear from you. And I see that Malika has been able to join us. Wonderful. Thank you, Malika.
Apologies for my problems in joining you all. Thank you for allowing me to be part of it.
Better late than never.
Well, we started Aramram as an independent web TV in 2009, which is 13 years ago. And the idea was let's say it's much simpler than everybody thinks. There's no independent media outlet, video media outlet, and since we discovered, you know, the whole world is going to broadcast, TV broadcast is going online, the television broadcasting is going online according to FCC regulations and technical book update in 1996. So we thought, and it's been used as a term, something called the democratization of the industry, where basically reaching out, independent voices now have the technology is offering them an easiness in reaching the public. We thought, you know, it's time to create the alternative content online. To us is alternative, although it's the technique is being used by broadcasters since the late 60s, 70s, 80s, and 90s to the like public broadcast service institutions around the world, and somehow other independent journalism. The issue we faced, that internet created a big chaos in the understanding of the government and how to control information. And that chaos basically created the divide, and you can easily discredit online or digital media because they're not on mainstream platform. Although we're talking about the alternative is the broadcasting technique, is not the content itself. The content keep evolving, even mainstream media, the content keep evolving. What we faced is first shock from the government, from all governments. We have independent voices that we cannot pinpoint and decide which category to put them, in which box to decide to put them. They're not mainstream, they're not alternative, they're independent. So the concept of independency was a bit new. The second major issue we faced is the industry itself. The whole industry is not mature. And controlling revenues is also not mature. It does not work on digital. So creating a business plan was a great issue. Even development funds was not developed enough to understand the nature of the business that we're facing in. So they thought of, we can do short-term funds related to specific content instead of funding and supporting an independent outlet regardless of the content of it as it is. And up till now, the future, I predicted the internet will be more suppressed and we're going into more closed networks. So basically, and this is what's going on. Basically, you can't tell what's going outside the world unless one of your network peers is Googling it or is searching it or is sharing it. So basically, I think we're gonna face a more closed network that we think that is World Wide Web, but in fact it's not. It's not. So what's our plans to cut it short? It's very simple. We want to have an independent media outlet, and we're gonna keep having the independent media outlet. The format of the shows, the content of the shows, the structure of the business itself, it keeps evolving to maintain itself up and running. That's and it's still up and running and making and generating income for the institution since I think 9 months after launch, we started covering costs.
Amazing. And the content is really what drew me to your companies. The content is brilliant, it's important, it's educational, it's providing civic education that is not anywhere else. And it's such a shame that it's not being valued, because it's really the building blocks of civil society is knowing how that civil society works, how engagement with government works. And you do it in a very non-subversive way, yet there's discomfort with anything, that is not completely under the umbrella of complete obedience and again, we really still do not have the concept of real individual sovereignty within the state. And this is where your work, Mohammed, is cutting edge in trying to educate on the importance of rights of people to access information, to have privacy. You have created, under the umbrella of CEMEX, Bread and Net to really target these issues of basically digital rights. And we are so lucky today to have with us a human rights lawyer who fought for the rights of a lot of disadvantaged people, including young girls who get trafficked. So we have somebody from Google who also is concerned with rights to address this. But I'll start with you, Mohammed. Can you tell us a little bit about your work in basically pushing to have more digital rights for our citizens in the Middle East and North Africa region?
Thank you, Nadia. Thank you, Wilson Center, for this session. I think we really passed the phase of the Arab Spring in our region. I think since then we have seen a lot of regulation, a lot of laws that has been approved to actually, just like what everyone says, to increase censorship, to increase fear, to increase all this. And they have kind of succeeded in that because they are supported with a lot of money. And we're talking about the Gulf money. I mean, a couple of weeks ago or like a month ago, I've seen like a Saudi rapper who was being imprisoned, and he's just a rapper. And from another angle, I see Saudi Arabia, they are investing $64 billion in entertainment. But we want to see what kind of entertainment they are investing in. Of course, the kind of entertainment where they can control all the narrative of this entertainment. Unlike Haramram, unlike all the independent media, they are trying to control the space as well from one arm. From another arm, they are trying to censor, imprison people who do not repeat the same story that they promote. For our work, I mean, we kind of are familiar with all this. What I'm trying to do in SMEX is we're trying to really create the community of critical thinkers about when it comes to digital issues and digital rights. We're trying to talk publicly about privacy, about freedom of expression. We want to talk publicly about Pegasus, NSO. We want to point fingers sometimes to the states who are buying these softwares to do these surveillance. We want to try to defend ourselves and be vocal about this. And I think this is really important because Sami mentioned about self-censorship, and we really feel that. I mean, I know a lot of famous journalists coming from Jordan or Lebanon who they come to us and we have a tech unit and we tested people and we discover that they have Pegasus, and they tell us that, yes, but we don't want to speak about this publicly. People are worried about speaking about that they've been hacked publicly, and that's illegal because they don't want to get attacks online. They don't want to be bullied because you have all these electronic armies that belong to Saudi Arabia or UAE or Iran or like all these different political regimes who are pushing and supporting censorship. We are so this event, Bread and Net, is really the goal is to create a peer-to-peer community. We want to bring people together. We want to talk about the sorry. We want to talk about these issues. We want to talk about sexuality online, LGBT online, people with there's a lot of issues about people with disabilities online. There's so many issues that intersect with all our digital life, and we need to discuss this. And some of it maybe the government will like, and some of it the governments will not like. But we're gonna do that because that's how the community come together. And that's how we try to support each other by being together in the same issues and by supporting each other's when a problem happens. We know we are fighting a lot of money coming from the Gulf and a lot of oppression, but there's no other way to do things. Something else we are trying to do is we're trying to do a lot of research. We're trying to follow the money. And we have noticed that the Gulf is also the hub of all these tech companies and also like international tech companies. And I'm glad we have someone from YouTube because I think tech companies, they have really a lot of responsibility. They need to talk the talk and walk the walk. We have seen recently that Google are working with Aramco, which is a state a state arm inside Saudi Arabia to do this huge data center inside the country. We talked to Google. There should be more human rights due diligence. The discussion that it has been done, I'm not sure how you can do human rights due diligence in a country like Saudi Arabia. It's kind of sarcastic, to be honest. We also have looked at the Saudi law for data protection. It's horrible. We have looked at all these laws. We actually collect all these laws and we try to analyze them. And all these laws exist to empower the state and to remove all kind of different rights on normal citizens. So I'm not sure how tech companies are actually doing business in these authoritarian regimes. And that's why we need to support for people like you as a lawyer and as a human rights lawyer at YouTube. For example, Donovan, just to push human rights issues because it is very important, and we need to we need to stop doing business with these regimes.
Thank you so much, Mohammed. You know, truly, the work that you do, it's activist, it's civil society, it's them pushing to have human rights, accountability, global standards. It's your work, guys, that actually make a difference in the long term. It's your work that, you know, I really do believe I've met a lot of very well-intentioned people that work for tech firms, and the work that you do makes them, you know, feel aware, like, oh, wait, we need to do better. And again, I share your sentiment. I'm really glad to have somebody from Google with us. And Malika, this is a tough spot to be. I'm sure you get asked a lot of tough questions. Google is one of the major companies in the world. You have headquarters, like Mohammed said, in the United Arab Emirates. They lead in creating a digital authoritarian region, not just state, because they're way reaching beyond, as Mohammed said, beyond their own borders. So what is Google doing to uphold human rights and do no harm?
Yeah, well, thank you. First of all, my name's not Donovan, it's Malika Saad Asar. And as you've noted, I'm a human rights lawyer. My work before coming to Google and YouTube was in the area of gender-based violence and racial justice. Much of that work was US-based, but also global. You know, I'm eager to hear what people's insights are, criticisms, recommendations. I also want to be clear about my purview, which is that I'm on the YouTube side, and my work is right now to think about how do we allow human rights activists and citizen journalists to advance the platform for their human rights work and free expression. So that is my area. That is what I can speak to. And I'm eager to think through how do we take the reach and power of YouTube and make that available to human rights activists and citizen journalists. And again, this is new, this is emergent, and I'm very, very eager to talk with each of you and learn about what do we need to do in order to make the platform accessible and valuable to human rights activists. And also, what are your thoughts around, it's one thing to invite that, and it's another to talk about the issue of our responsibility to those individuals on our platform. And so eager to know and hear from you about what are your thoughts around one, leveraging the platform for human rights, but then also the issue of protocols of responsibility that might be part of our work too, in inviting citizen journalists and human rights activists to leverage the platform.
Malika, could you share with us how do you envision the role of YouTube? Is, again, it's a major platform. It's #1 platform in sharing videos. So how do you see it? How do you see your contribution to human rights, to resisting authoritarian trends? How does it look from your end?
Yeah. So, when you're trained as a human rights lawyer, you're trained to be able to document, right? And you document the abuse so that the world may bear witness. And for me, my interest in the opportunity of YouTube is how we can use that platform for the bearing witness of human rights abuses. Look, we saw that with what happened with George Floyd, right? The power of taking your phone and recording the human rights violation that is playing out and then sharing that at a global scale because of a platform like YouTube. So in my mind, it's really thinking through how do we leverage the YouTube platform to do the basic thing that all human rights lawyers and activists know must happen, which is to document the abuse and to ensure that the world bears witness, so that the world knows, so that there is a response. And all of us know the difference between spaces that are digitally connected and those that are not. And that where there is digital connection, there is more of that opportunity for that bearing witness. So in my mind, it becomes an opportunity to ensure that we understand that the YouTube platform isn't just a place for videos that are about entertainment, that are videos about, musicians and artists for fun, but that this is also a platform to be able to bear witness, to know, to document, to record, to understand at a global scale the human rights violations that are happening. I see these phones and this platform as human rights tools as much as forms of entertainment.
So one mechanism used by authoritarian regimes is troll farms, where basically somebody could report, with a video, an abuse of human rights, but then that story gets completely flooded with the regime narratives. I mean, they have, like Mohammed said, billions more money, so, and how does I don't know if that's something you ever look at, like having headquarters in these authoritarian states because they have the money. how do you negotiate that? So
that's not in my purview, but what I'm really interested in doing is convening spaces where we can talk about those challenges and the work and the recommendations of what can be done to ensure freedom of expression for creators, for human rights activists, for citizen journalists is part of how we proceed. I think, my responsibility is to the human rights community and ways in which we can create spaces between the company, and in particular on the YouTube side, and the communities of activists to be able to understand what can we do better.
Thank you, Malika. Sami, I'll get back to you. So you've heard from Malika, and I know, like, I have a lot of friends at Google and other spaces that really do want to see their platform furthering human rights, do want to see, how do you see that relationship? And I'm going to ask you all to comment on this. How do you see that relationship between activists and, you're a social entrepreneur, you do things, but like you said, even when you do things that are apolitical, you still have to bump into accountability governance laws because, there are rules of engagement in every country. And these rules of engagements are increasingly oppressive in the Middle East, oppressive and repressive. So how do you see your what can you do with tech firms? How can you, is there something to be done here?
Yeah. Well, thank you for this question. I think, Malika has been really spot on a lot of what she said. I think we are currently going into a battle for content, like who will be there, who will be available for people to check and to follow and to go viral. So there's always there's a hidden battle between the content creators, between the bloggers, the tech companies, and also the governments who will occupy the cyberspace, who will reach to the masses. So, it's always tough to decide, and I'm sure at the level of Google's level, where the algorithms has to do with a lot of variables. You can see, for example, TikTok right now, and you can see the level of content on TikTok, and you can see what people are following and where they are spending their time. So with TikTok say, okay, let me take more serious, maybe ethical, maybe human rights-based approach and ban a lot of the videos that are on TikTok. This is up to maybe the company, but also there's lack of regulations when it comes to the spread of that content. And that goes with the human rights content, the news and all that. This is not people, at least from our observation, for example, on YouTube channel, on Fursa YouTube channels, when we put like a bit of serious content, learning content, you get some views, but if you put a reel about what's happening in the office, entertaining reel, it goes viral. So the consumers of the content right now, people, and that goes with what I said, the apathy, the lack of hope, they're not interested right now to follow whether human rights, documentaries, even news. In my circle, people are not following the news because simply they know that the news is going to bring them down further, and they're already down. So they want to be isolated. They want to follow some entertaining news. So it's tough because now it is a way you need to think inevitably about the approach. So if you want to put human rights content or news, it has to be in the entertaining model. So it's just mix and match. So you cannot influence people and mobilize and get people engaged online if it's only the classical way of doing human rights work. And I'm on the board of the National Center for Human Rights, the NCHR, which is the Jordanian center, and it's semi-governmental. So I keep pushing for changing the methodologies. So for example, whether on Facebook or on any online tools, they are not followed enough. People, they don't care about their reports, about whatever statements that they take, because simply it's not interesting anymore. So it is right now, it is the time to rethink about, so the tools and the methodologies should influence the type of content that we put, and we need to look at the channels in a different way. So YouTube today is growing really fast. People, for example, are really following vloggers who share their daily life. Maybe we need to think of sharing the daily life of a human rights activist, what kind of things that they face when they go to prison or when they go to, so it becomes more entertaining. It's not easy. There's a lot of restrictions, of course, but we need to think differently. And I think we need to push ourselves to change the tools, change the methodologies in our way of thinking. And I think this is a great, having the tech companies on the same page and having the same agenda, which is at the end, we are all here for the better of this world, for the better of this globe. So if we follow the trends, or we follow what people are always demanding, I think we're going we're going nowhere. And honestly, I don't have TikTok, but I get sometimes people send me some videos, or it's very disappointing. I really think it's very disappointing the way that the new generation is thinking. And honestly, for any system, this is a good thing. If people are really alienated, and if what they want is just to dance on some music on TikTok, this is great. This is beautiful. So I'm not accountable at all. There's no people who are interested to hold me accountable. And there are no people even to participate in elections. There's no people to really represent and constitute a representative democracy the way that we think. So, and that's why we see year after year less participation in every election. Not even in the Arab countries. It's even going in Europe, worldwide. People are just not interested. And that will lead, unfortunately, maybe to the collapse of the current democratic system. Anyways, I think I talked a lot.
Thank you, Sami. This is, I mean, it really is a bleak picture, but the digital space, because it's so open and so anybody can produce, and there is such competition for our attention. There's phenomenal competition that is just so easy to pick dessert, if you would, just instead of substantive food. But Abdeslam, this is where you come in. You create content that is quite substantive. You create content that teaches. And I'm often amazed, like, why is your content not part of the educational curricular all over the world, really? Like, there are refugees, Syrian refugees in Germany. Why, I really would like to see a world where content created with such thoughtfulness, like the one you and Hams and your colleagues, which I've seen a lot of, go global, because it's really important. But as Sami was saying, that there's constant, the content needs to be entertaining. In addition to, I mean, the standards now to capture the attention is you have to work that much harder, not to mention all the other challenges. So how do you deal with this, Abdeslam?
Well, this is a very difficult question. Briefly, it's in two parts. As a craft, media is a craft, and it kept changing since the late 19th century. The technique, how you write, radio change, then radio came in, radio changed and developed. Now the new radio is podcast. Podcast is digital radio, basically. Then online media changed, made it more fast. So it's a craft, and you can keep adapting and keep changing. That's that's a technique you use based on your market research, target audience, who's your audience, what's the meshes, and then you build it as you build the TVC, as you think to create a brand. It's content is a brand. Information is branding itself. It's by itself, it's branding. So that's the craftsmanship part. The other part is the platform, and it's the technique, the infrastructure. unfortunately, I know, sorry, it might sound a bit aggressive, and we never trusted YouTube since the start, since 2009. And the YouTube, their business model is they give you the service for free and they own you, which is fair. It's a smart business model. Yeah, we wanted to pay for the services meaning, having a player and a platform and a server. But it wasn't available at that time, and we wanted to control advertising revenue, to have our own pre-roll, post-roll, mid-roll, and that's why we opted for Brightcove. Player Brightcove is a company that gives you like YouTube services, but you have to pay a yearly premium, very expensive, and it was crazy at that time. Unfortunately, YouTube, unfortunately for us, was smart for them. YouTube has their own algorithm to generate viewership, and their algorithm. I'm not talking about civil society, freedom of speech, any educational content, and that's any educational producer working on YouTube platform will tell you the same. Worldwide, from the Middle East, Europe, the States, their content won't generate clicks, and by nature they can't, and they might use some clickbait techniques, but by nature the content is not entertaining by itself. It's like, you're telling me, how come Elle magazine or Vogue sells more than Newsweek's or Foreign Affairs? Okay, it will sell more for sure. Vogue, Foreign Affairs will never compete with Vogue or Elle magazine or GQ, CQ, I can't remember, whatever. So basically, you won't be able to ask the question. It's asking the question, how can we mainstream and make it available for everybody? And I think the only thing that I request, and most people should request it, is for big corporations like YouTube and other server providers, is not to lock us down when they are requested to do so. YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, whoever, they need to understand, and regardless of their corporate social responsibility strategy, to work and promote environment, or now as a trend, human rights and equality, and gender equality. It's an thing, and regardless of their connection and their politics, the company's politics, their connection with governments, foreign government, local government, US government, regardless, and they need to give us leeway and not to be closed down or simply decided and they close you if 10 people or 50 people report you. And that's increased basically when they started opening their offices, Facebook especially, and Twitter and YouTube, when they started opening their offices in the Gulf and Dubai specifically. And what, by terms of political terms, what today's terrorist might be your ally next year, and vice versa. So basically, you can't pick and choose. Now we can promote gender equality or human rights, and next couple of years is not within your policy mandate. So basically, we're out of it. But that's why I say we have our own player. We use YouTube as a playlist. Once we're done with it, and it's published on our own player, then Facebook for engagement. When we use Facebook, we have the same issue with Facebook. Facebook is more of an engagement discussion platform. Then we dump it up, we publish it on YouTube. But honestly, you cannot ask a big, huge company like YouTube to take into consideration human rights at the moment. That's my personal opinion. At this moment in time, they might be might be some crossroads between YouTube and some policymakers, but it might change in the future. So basically, you can't build your institution on that short-term policy. That's my own take on it. And again, no offense for YouTube.
I'm going to go to you, Malika. So really human rights, civil society, all of these values, I mean, the rest of the world is trying to get these values, trying to live by these values. It's only in basically liberal democracies that not only are we living by these values in the West, but we're trying to empower others around the world to have them, so that we're not the only ones who are free to do whatever we want, say whatever we want, criticize our government, run for office, hold people accountable. And it's a beautiful notion because other regimes are wanting to export authoritarianism, not human rights. So I do believe we have the moral high ground here. So what I wanted to ask you is, you work in Google. How receptive is the leadership of Google to you wanting to push human rights? How receptive are they to, I mean, you know, the purpose of any company is to make money, right? Or is this the priority? Is that why, you know, the headquarters in the Gulf? How receptive are they to having, you know, for example, meet with civil society in the Middle East, like Abdussalam? I mean, again, their content is truly brilliant, or what Sami is doing, or Muhammad. How receptive are they to expose their, even maybe especially those who work on human rights, especially those who work in the Gulf, expose them to, I would be curious to hear, you know, what do you face internally, perhaps?
Well, look, I graduated from law school over 20 years ago, and I was clear, unequivocal, unapologetic about doing human rights law, and only saw my work in the nonprofit civil society space. I never envisioned being in any type of corporate entity. And I spent over 15 years in the NGO space as a human rights lawyer. I think now that it is critical for human rights lawyers not only to be in those NGO civil society spaces, but for us to be in tech companies as well. And I think that is a pioneering space. I don't think most human rights lawyers contemplate the need and urgency of being in tech spaces. And I think tech spaces are trying to figure out, how do we bring human rights lawyers in? I think what Google and YouTube have done in terms of me bringing me in and allowing me to be in this space is outlier, is unusual. I'm not able to look, there's not a crew of us that come together as human rights lawyers in tech spaces and talk about our work. We're not that many. So I think from, when I go to law schools now, I urge human rights lawyers to be thinking about our role outside and in addition to NGOs and civil society, that we have to be in these emergent tech spaces. And I also believe it's critical for tech spaces, all of them, not simply Google and YouTube, all of them, to really think through the urgency and the need and the imperative of bringing our voices into these spaces. We have to be there. We have to be at the table, even if the moral compass that we bring forward is not going to be adhered to the way we want to see from a rights-based framework. We still have to be part of the conversation. And that is what I have done at Google and YouTube. That's what I've been allowed to do. And I think for the purposes of where I am right now, in terms of YouTube, I do want to individually talk to each of you, because I do really want to think about what are the opportunities here around, as you said, Sami, in the noise of all the content, in the war and struggle of whose voices are centered, what issues are centered. I think it's imperative to think through the importance of human rights voices being centered on our platforms. And it is fraught without question. But in terms of my own sense of responsibility, being at YouTube as a human rights lawyer, I am eager to speak to each of you around what does it look like to carve out this space.
Thank you so much, Malika. I'll definitely link you
Please.
all guys up.
Yes, yes.
That's one thing I really hope my research will do, is get people to speak to each other and get people, because like Sami said, we all have the intention of making the world a better place for the largest number of people. That is what drives us. So Muhammad, you have an ally already in Malika. I was wondering, I mean, your adversaries are quite intimidating and huge and very well funded with deep pockets. Who are your allies? How do you, who do you see as, you know, how do you measure also your impact in educating on this really important topic?
Thanks, Nadia. This is a very important question. I mean, of course, Malika is one of the allies, obviously, because she is coming from the civil society. And this is something we have seen in the last 5 years, that many lawyers and activists have switched their career to be working within the tech companies. We hope we're going to succeed in creating some of the changes. We don't know yet if this is something we're going to be successful at or not. So there's fewer years to come. I mean, I really think like there has been some discussion about activist and non-activist. I personally don't. I think everyone is an activist personally. Like everyone, for example, on this call is an activist. I like it's not a job. Like people don't work as activists. They are activists within their own field. So we really need to just get away a little bit from this westernized naming for what's happening in our region and calling people activist or non-activist, because there are so many activists. My mom is a teacher. She was an activist. So like it's not really like the young people who are sitting behind the screen and trying to change the world. I mean, this is just like a cliche image for many people coming from the West to think about activists from our region or other region, because this is not the reality of things. I really think there's a lot to do to try to create the change. And I personally don't see the change as actually toppling regimes. And I don't see it also not toppling regimes. I mean, I really don't think about this angle as much as I really think about people control their own agencies and have their own critical thinking about the issues, and to do well with the people around them, and to give the best of their ability to treat other people in the way they'd like to be treated. That includes some people within governments, but unfortunately, it's not the case most of the time. So back to your question, who are the allies? Like the allies is really like we are on the right side of things, and some people are on the wrong side of things, and we really need to keep pushing. And the more we push in an organic way, the numbers will be increasing. And I think this is how we create kind of movement to change things within government and within entities, etc.
So how do you work with tech firms like Google?
I mean, Google is a huge billions of dollars of entities. We are small NGOs around the globe. We try to lobby, we try to advocate. There are good people within these companies who try to listen sometimes. And of course, there is a lot of people within these companies who don't agree on how to move forward on things. So we try to push as much as we can. Unfortunately, we cannot boycott these companies, because they are becoming the civic space in many countries. Like in our region, there's no civic space because everything is being controlled by the state, whether it's physical or online. So the few places that still exist are the spaces who are privatized by these companies. So we really need to keep talking with these companies and to try to find our allies and to try to advocate for the changes we want to make.
I hope you will find quite a few allies. I am getting some questions from the audience, so I'm gonna start going through these. There's one, I think it's directed at you, Malika. It's about, it has become very easy for authoritarian regimes with their troll farms to report content that is, I've had a lot of activists who are putting videos or content in other platforms that is pro-human rights that gets flagged out as hate speech or. So how can you, the person who asked the question asked, how can you comment about how to bypass the government's taken off content?
So are you talking about when YouTube pulls it down as hate speech or as violent content?
Yes, and how do you, how do you counter the authoritarian push to not allow any content that is for civil engagement, for accountability of governments, for all the values that they don't want to see as an authoritarian government?
Sure. Well, one, I would really urge people to be connected to me, because when that kind of content is pulled down around being seen as violent or hate-based, that is the importance of being the human rights lawyer in the room, is to be able to give that perspective. So again, I see my role as being the bridge for human rights lawyers and activists and organizations to be able to bring that information forward so that there can be the conversation with the necessary leadership around why content was taken down, and being able to represent the human rights perspective around why the content should stay up, and being able to make a rational argument around that, understanding all the other restrictions and rules and regulations that we have to negotiate as a global company.
Malika, I really do see that you have a really important role to play even within Google in educating your colleagues, because you guys have such power by virtue of being part of this powerful entity, that the more of you inside, as you said, the better for all of humanity. So maybe anybody who wants to answer this, please just raise your hands. But one listener asked, how would you describe a new 21st century social contract? And I'm going to merge that with a similar question, or how do actors across MENA continue to leverage and accelerate the digital revolution, and yet not give the government more additional tools to mentor and censor their citizens? So maybe I'll hear from each one of you, whoever wants to go first on this dilemma. That, as Muhammad said, the digital space is the only civic space available in the absence of a free debate in a lot of these places. So we need these spaces. So how do we have these spaces be protected without giving the government tools to silence the very people who want to further such spaces? Anybody wants to take a jab at that?
Yeah, I'll say something here. It's our experience. Since we started, we changed the registration, the legal entity 3 times.
Wow.
Because there wasn't any law that regulates online videos. So it was print or digital. So we had to keep changing the entity, the legal entity, and the registration of the entity 3 times to keep it up and running. That's technically. And I would like to add something about what Muhammad was saying about the toppling regimes. Yes, I do agree. We don't think of toppling regimes. We don't think of pro and opposition as a format. We just focus on educating the individual what is diversity, basically, but through producing a very diverse content and critical thinking. Once you make available for everybody to consume a diverse image, you're unconsciously helping her or him to understand, and there's not a unique or a mono format of thinking or of shapes or of images or of in life. So the whole idea, to make available critical thinking to anybody. And personally, I don't believe we should care about the government or the law as per se the law. I think we should focus on how to keep the space up and running with free content. Is it simple? Is it easy? No, it's not. Is the law makes it easy for media people to produce content and produce media? No, and it wasn't before digital, before the digital world. The interest of educating the individual is non-existent in the Arab world. There's no interest. There's no priority. It's not in the mandate of the government. We need to increase the expenditure and the budget for education or culture. It's not. So basically, we're facing whatever any other entity, non-digital entity, is facing if it's regarding education. So personally, I believe we should create what in the media business world was created is the network, the big network. We need to think horizontally, not vertically. Aramram is a drop in an ocean. It's irrelevant, and I can say the same thing about all other organizations who has human rights issues as a main focus. We should create our own bouquet. They call it bouquet. Our own network of NGOs, institution that does research, that's content, institution that works on education, media. When you create your own network, you become as big as YouTube is. You know what I mean? If you create your own connections, you can become creative. It's a World Wide Web. So basically, there's no need to build a big institution, but there's a need to communicate and connect the small institution. Al-Qaeda style.
Here, Malika.
What else?
Well, competition is great, right? This is what we want: freedom to compete.
Yeah. And I would love to have YouTube or Google thinking of the small companies and the small institutions and the small individuals who trying to do something better for the world. But you can't ask from a big company to help you maintain yourself. All you can do is try to push to advocate for freedom of speech. This is what's needed. Bas.
Go ahead. Thank you, Abdussalam.
Yeah. I mean, I really like what Abdussalam has to say, and like within the event that we're trying to do is we're really trying to bring together people, not to build one network or one community, because we really want like communities, and community that grow from the periphery and not from the center. And this is really essential because it's not really one community, it's communities. And for example, I talk a lot with donors in development, and everyone tells you now the future is like for small, medium NGOs and not for big NGOs because it's too big to manage. It costs a lot of money. Unfortunately, when it comes to tech companies, it's the opposite. It feels like the future to the mono, the one Google, the Meta that is growing. And this is a bit scary because it's a control, and it's a control that, and now we've seen Elon Musk, who's basically managed Twitter now. He bought Twitter and he owns Tesla. Like, what if he goes to China? I want to sell a lot of Tesla. Like, he wants to make it his government. So like there's this is where we are. There's a lot to do, but the tech companies is the new maybe digital is a new digital authoritarianism where about mute.
Thank you. Sorry. I wonder if the next question is also As one listener is asking, how is the censorship target specific for example, some research on former Muslims and the censorship of not just former Muslims, but even people who want to reform Islam from within, but who are not part of the traditional institutions of Islamic thought, are being persecuted. They're being censored, but they're also being persecuted. So their call for freedom of religion is being suppressed. Are there other minority groups that in your work on civil society you see as being targeted and being government censorship in particular in the Middle East region? Hamad, I can't hear you. I don't know if you're muted.
And I'm sorry I'm speaking a lot, but like briefly to give one example, it doesn't need to be like a minority or group or something, but for example, independent media. There has been a hype in the independent media after the Arab Spring, and then we get to a point where there has been a lot of regulation in a way that these entities cannot work anymore. So for example, there's a lot of independent media in Egypt who are blocked. Basically, they are blocked and they use VPN, and they publish their content on social media only, or their content is being consumed by the people outside. Jordan is another example. There's a lot of regulation on media. So there's a lot of censorship also, and like you need to get a permission and all that. And this is also something that I want to point out is about local laws, because with tech companies, they tell you that we need to obey local laws. But specifically, our problems from this region is local laws. So really, tech companies need to be aware that these local laws are just being put in place to create more oppressive regimes and to create more censorship.
Thank you, Mohammed. Yeah, there really has been, I agree, phenomenal developments with independent media and independent journalism. Haber, Rasif 22, Mada Masr, I mean, really amazing quality, world class. And they are facing, but they're doing such good work, truly. I have two questions, one for Sami and one for Malika. So Sami, you spoke about the apathy, which is, this is the delight for any authoritarian regime, that they censor a few people and the rest of the people feel like, okay, I'm dropping this issue because it doesn't impact me day to day, so I just need to live. How would you go about tackling apathy? And then Malika, the question for you is, we only have one Malika, but we have a lot of issues with human rights. So how can we employ artificial intelligence in actually doing, basically, how do we scale the work you're trying to do with human rights, both inside Google, on the World Wide Web? So I'll let you, Sami, answer the first question, and then I'll hear from you, Malika.
Apathy and how to tackle apathy and how to get of the vicious cycle of apathy. I mean, this is, I think, Nobel Prize winning question. I mean, it's if you answer it, and if you take the answer to action is actually where you get the Nobel Prize. But I think it's definitely multifactorial when it comes to, the economic issues, economic challenges. They have a major effect on apathy. As I said, the idea of being an active citizen, feeling that you are the sense of belonging, the loyalty, the feeling that you are in a country where you are protected in a way or another, whether in the future health-wise or for the education of your children or so on. So most of the components, and this is where we see, the commands, people mainly say, I want to migrate to a country or emigrate to a country where, I can have a future. And what they mean by the future, or I can be protected, or I can be feeling safe. And the definition of being secure or safe is health security, education security, and jobs and some kind of income. Then after that, it comes to freedom of expression and the representation. So it's today, I think the demands from the people's perspective and the grassroots are for the, I mean, we're talking about the bottom of Maslow's pyramid. Still, the ability to secure your food and then health and education. So we're still at the basic needs level. So when people feel that they are losing the battle on basic needs, this is where they go into apathy. So if I want to answer you and just say, oh yeah, if we increase the freedom of expression, we will solve the issue of apathy among the Arab youth, I would say it's not. Even if you maybe they will voice out their concerns, their demands, but it's not gonna. And that's what happened at some point with some in some of the countries in the Arab Spring, that people voiced out and then nothing happened. So they had the pleasure and the excitement of voicing out what they want. So they felt that, oh, things is going to change. So there was a momentum of 3-4 years. People were excited and then nothing happened. So they went back to square zero or even minus. So I think the problem is you're talking about like securing basic needs and improving health, education, and then you move to freedom of expression and political changes. And that, of course, goes along. And those, I mean, sometimes there is like this kind of indirect, I would say, thought that human rights is about freedom of expression. But, yes, freedom of expression and is part of the human rights, but also the part of the human rights is ability to access good hospitals, is the ability to have good education so you can compete in the job market it's shrinking more and more. And, sometimes it's sad to see how it's going in Jordan, where the level of education system is really getting worse and worse. And people, they think that after they're going to finish university or school, they're going to find a job. And if you look at the type of education that they receive, they can never have a job in the future jobs or even in the current job market. So just to wrap up, I think in order to break apathy, it is the time for regimes to think long-term, securing the basic needs, making sure that they deliver on the social contract from their side. And that includes the health, education, and political rights. So, yeah.
Sami, let me just say, I would not put it past you to win a Nobel Prize, given how much you have done already with everything you've done. So
that's nice. Yeah, maybe.
It's true. I would not be surprised.
We still need to work maybe another 20-30 years in order to deserve it. But, yeah.
Again, it doesn't matter when. I would not be surprised one bit. You have truly transformed a scene before anybody even paid attention. So for our listeners, Sami was an early coder before it was a sexy thing to do, and created this platform just, in his spare time, Fursa, to, again, really help his fellow young people, his peers, find jobs. And it spiraled because it met a real need that nobody else was addressing. And then from there went on to do, as Marissa said, he was a serial social entrepreneur. So Malika, back to you. And how do we scale human rights? And there's another question that came in that maybe is also, I'll address it to all of you guys, which is, how can global citizens negotiate or demand or to basically have privacy as users, like the tech firms, the governments? Like, how do we mediate this arena? But I'll start with you, Malika, of AI.
Well, look, I'm all about how do we develop and build and structure AI to be AI for human rights. These technologies, these algorithms can either be weaponized against human rights or built to reinforce and adhere to human rights. I'm really proud of the work that Google did around the human rights principles for AI use. And I think we have to continue to think about what does it mean to build AI for good. I also want to emphasize.
Can you tell us more about that? Because I'm not, just in case our listeners do not know about it.
About what? About AI
the
for
initiative
good?
that Google just did, that you just mentioned.
Yeah, it was done, I believe, 2 years ago, and it is available. It is external facing to understand the ways in which we developed and what those guiding principles are on the use of AI. I think it's also, and I think that's something that every tech space needs to do, that it's not enough for one company to do this. We have to have that type of echo chamber around how we look at AI and will use AI. I also want to emphasize, though, that, look, no tech space can move forward without the daily consideration of human rights challenges and considerations. And that is why those who are interested in studying human rights law have to really think about not only civil society, but also the tech space. What does it mean to be trained as a human rights lawyer to go into tech? And how do we make that more of an expectation in terms of the development of human rights law, human rights legal degrees, as well as an expectation in the tech space that the expertise, the lived experience, and the background of human rights lawyers have a place in tech companies, not just one, but as how they do business, because there's a real need for our voices, and also there's a real need for law schools to recognize the absolute imperative of training human rights lawyers to go in this direction.
Thank you, Malika. Mohammed, do you work on this domain? Do you work with human rights lawyers? Do you, on the global scene, as somebody who trains NGOs and trains people and activists? And
I mean, I see a lot of potential for lawyers and people who have legal degree in this space, of course. And this is something that we are trying to expand on. We have a legal unit. We have a team of policy advocates who are trying to look at laws, analyze laws. I mean, I will share here as well in the chat, like a platform we have done, and we're trying to collect the laws in our region, analyze it, and see where we can do some kind of advocacy. So definitely, I see a lot of potential, and there's a lot of interested people in our region, and I hope more and more there will be more of them not only working with us, but working with tech companies, so they can have this learning processes happens from our region as well within these tech companies. Nadia, you're muted.
Yeah, sorry. So the website that you shared is cyrilla.org. So this is an organization that basically goes through the laws.
So it's basically cyrilla.org. It's a global project that we work as well with other Global South organizations. And we collected all the laws and case laws that exist in different parts of the world, including the MENA region. And that's something that we are trying to update now as well. So that will include more laws and policies from the region.
I have a question from one listener directed, I think, to Sami and Abdussalam about Jordan. Jordan led the Middle East in terms of innovation, in terms of technology, in terms of creating, was an early hub in the region, but it has in recent years, believed to have gone a lot more repressive. And the listener is asking, how are you finding the digital space with a lot of recent arrests? And if you could each comment on this a little bit, Sami and Abdussalam.
I'll give the space to Abdussalam first, and then I have some additions because I just spoke.
Abdussalam, you are muted.
Yeah, what arrest? There's no arrests.
Good answer, since this is recorded.
No. I don't know. What do you want me to say exactly? And
the listener is asking, like, you know, do you feel nervous in the digital space these days because of these repressive moves?
I don't know. I think they're doing their job, and we're doing ours. Yeah, but we opened Aramram in Jordan to be the base for Levant. And we never thought, we're going to have the freedom and easiness of production as if we're based in Copenhagen or Oslo. And we you know what I mean? The buzz of online business and entrepreneurship in the digital sphere is gone. It was there in 2008, 9, 10, I think. I can't recall exactly when there was a hype about investments. And I think it's simply gone. It's done. And we're back to business as normal. Yeah, they won't deal with us in a very special way. Uniquely, I think they are a bit the security apparatus. I think they're a bit overwhelmed, and it's not easy to control as 2 or 3 newspapers and 1 TV channels and 1 radio broadcast. But so I think it's a transitional period, and we have to keep doing what we do, and we shouldn't expect anything good. Yes.
You know, the relationship between authoritarian regimes and the security apparatuses of authoritarian activists is a cat and mouse, right? And like you said, Abdeslam, it's easy to control 1 or a few or 10 or 20 broadcasters versus millions of broadcasters. Each can reach millions. So it's a lot different ballgame, which is why it's really important for liberal democracies to make sure that, you know, regimes do not create their own internets versus this global space, because that would really isolate people further.
They already did, Nadia.
Yeah, in China they did, it's true. And the United Arab Emirates is
the
same.
The Arab world, let's talk about China. The Chinese are smarter in dealing with technology than anybody else. At least they're incorporated education as indoctrination in their control technique. They don't have the thing that Sammy had a problem on TikTok with. Kids don't see them, by the way, in China. They're prohibited. You can't play it. They even have a shosmo. They even have they even restricted the playback to, I think, 2 minutes or 3 minutes, and there must be a pause in it.
That's wow.
So I don't think, honestly, I don't think there is there is an excess of oppressive atmosphere in Jordan, rather than business as usual.
Okay, Sami?
Well, as Abdeslam said, I think it's everyone is doing their business. What I think we need to do is to think long term. I think it's not about currently it's not about restrictions, and what we need to do. I mean, Jordan has been really good in thinking long term in the past, in the 60s and the 70s, where they developed good educational system, and they could graduate good people who led the economies in the region. So when it comes to digital rights and innovation and technology, yes, we're getting a bit backward on that. And I think this is just when we think short term, and when we think that we just want to firefight. And I think what we need to do is really have an open mind and think long term.
Thank you, Sami. We have just 5 minutes left. So I thought what we'll do is leave our listeners with concluding remarks from each one of you, whatever you want to share. on this topic of digital authoritarianism and digital freedom. So just raise your hands if you want to go next. And yeah, concluding remarks. Nobody's, Muhammad, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, as I said before, and I agree with Sami, is like, we really need to think long term. There's still a lot of things to do, and when it comes to the digital space, like everything intersects, and we live in a region that we all intersect with each others. So and just like you said, Nadia, like it's cat and mouse, and there's a lot of potential to advocate for change somewhere, and some places it's going to be closed communities. So we just need to keep trying and see where we can try to create some change and support each other, and just open potential opportunities for other people.
Thank you, Muhammad. Sami?
Sorry. So I would repeat what I said maybe earlier, that I think the tools and the methodologies and the approaches needs to be revamped. I think we need, as actors in the field, to rethink and reintroduce and even revolutionize the approaches that we are doing. And that might be mixing entertainment with human rights, with blogging, I don't know, but we need to get out of our comfort zone in the channels and the tools that we're using. And I think it's a fierce competition, but it's also it's a market, and we need to be able to prove ourselves. And combining the social and the human rights parts with with entertainment, I think it can be something that we can build on. Yeah, and diversifying the channels.
Thank you, Sami. Malika, you gonna go next?
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you for the honor of the invite and the honor of being part of this amazing panel of folks who are doing the work. I deeply believe, as a human rights lawyer, that these digital platforms and digital tools are also human rights platforms and human rights tools. And I'm deeply dedicated to understanding more and creating more opportunities for human rights activists, citizen journalists, NGOs to understand the ways in which to leverage those digital tools and a platform like YouTube to be able to advance the work and the movement. And I am fully aware of all of the fraught issues that are around that. But I'm also clear in my, my belief that as much as we see the ways in which entities and bad actors weaponize the internet against our rights, that there is also continued promise and potential for using the internet as a way of more deeply realizing our rights. And I'm committed to that work.
Thank you so much, Malika. Abdussalam? You are muted.
I think Abdussalam had already started his Eid.
There he is.
No, I have
you
a problem
already started the celebration of Eid without us?
No, I've already celebrating Easter for the past 5 days.
Okay. So any concluding remarks on our subject?
First, I'm really thankful for the opportunity to speak in this with these beautiful minds around us. And as Sami said, it's all about innovation, recreating yourself consistently. We've been doing that for the past 14 years, since 2009, and we'll keep doing that. And again, it's everybody said it. It's a long-term. Media is long-term. Is never a short-term thing. We need to think long-term. And we need to keep maneuvering around the laws and advocating for more rights. This is it, nothing less.
Thank you so much. Thank you, each and every one of you, for the phenomenal work that you do so that more people can live a better life. And I'm honored to have moderated this panel. And I will put you, I hope this will not be the last time we are gathered together. I'm certain we will meet in person, hopefully in the near future. And thank you so much for giving us your time. And thank you for our listeners who tuned in for the past hour and a half. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.